Before the last presidential election, I was playing golf. And I was playing golf in a charity tournament. And in this particular charity tournament, it was here locally. You would take four guys with you, or not four, three other guys. So it'd be four of you that would go and you would play in this in a charity tournament. For this one, they just wanted you to bring you and one other person. And they were going to pair you up with another group from the community. It was kind of a way just to kind of blend people together. So that was kind of a neat idea. So Brady and I went. And for those of you who don't know Brady typically is over there on the far side of the stage playing the guitar. I think he's in the back right now. Is Brady back there still? Okay, yeah, so Brady's back there. He's got lots of tattoos and a really nice red beard, reddish beard. He's a nice guy. You should get to know him. Anyway, he and I were like, hey, let's go play this golf tournament. So he and I were playing this golf tournament. And we got paired up with these other two, and I didn't know their names, but I looked at one of them, and I was like, man, he looks so familiar to me. And I'm trying to figure out, they introduce themselves, they tell me their names, and we shake hands or whatever, and I'm like, man, I still don't know, but that guy, I've seen his face somewhere before. I've seen it. And I'm processing, but I don't want to ask him because I feel like I should know this already. I should know, and so I don't want to say, hey, how do I know you? You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to do that. And he for sure didn't pretend like he knew me at all. And so I was like, man, this is so confusing. So it takes me a few holes. We're talking, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. I was like, I know who this guy is that I'm playing with. And I'm not going to give you his name. But at the time, I know. At the time, he was the minority leader for the Georgia State Senate. And that's how I knew him, because I was like, hey, he's a politician, right? And so I was engaged, and so I slyly let him know that I had figured out who he was without letting him know that I previously hadn't known who he was, right? And so I'm like, so tell me how things going at the Capitol. We start having this conversation, and we start getting in a political conversation, right? And so I start asking him some questions, and we're asking some questions. We're going back and forth. And so finally, he starts asking me some questions about politics. It's like, finally, someone's asking me some questions. I would love to share with you what I think. We might disagree about a few things, but I would love to share with you my suggestions. But I told him, I said, look, hey, let me tell you something. There's one thing. The first candidate that says this is what I'm going to run on, and I promise you this, I don't care if they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, green, blue, gray, whatever party they want to think of. If they will do this one thing, oh, good gracious alive, I might recruit everybody on the planet to vote for them, right? Here it is. You ready for this? And I told him, I said, this is the single most important thing to me. When it comes to fixing our country, this is the single most important thing, is we need to make it to where you can only vote and pass on one law at a time, right? You can't add any amendments to it. No, you can't add any, hey, I'll vote for your bill if you'll put my bill and tag it onto yours. None of that. Every single amendment, every single bill, only one at a time, and the bills have to be shorter than 10 pages long. If you can't write clear enough to tell us this is why this is a law, less than 10 pages, for the entire country to be able to digest it, one thing at a time, no pork or whatever you want to call it, no additional addendums on it, just one thing. Let your bill stand on its own 2 feet without any favors from anybody else. If you will do that, man, I'm telling you, that person can get elected. And he started laughing. And he was like, Pastor, that's impossible. I was like, why is it impossible? He's like, look, I agree with you. It would probably actually be good, but it's just not going to happen. And I was like, why not? If everybody thinks like you do, like I do, that this would actually be the clearest thing, it would make it so much easier, right? We would get rid of so much useless stuff that takes place because we wouldn't be doing favors for each other to do votes. It would just be vote on the bill. Yes or no, that's it, right? No favors. And he said, well, it's because of the sweeteners. The sweeteners? He's like, yeah, they sweeten the deal. I was like, oh, lobbyists. He was like, yeah, lobbyists. And I was like, well, let's get rid of the lobbyists, Let's get rid of the lobbyists. He was like, oh, yeah. Okay, all right. So I could tell I was getting nowhere with this guy. So I was like, you know what, we'll change the subject. So we go a couple holes later, and we're talking about other things now. We've moved on. And so his playing partner, I didn't recognize him at all. I had nothing at all. So I eventually asked him, I was like, so, hey, obviously, you're not leading minority party here in Georgia. What are you doing? And he was like, well, I'm a sweetener. Dang it! Man. And there you have it. Now, I don't say that to say that there was anything inappropriate going on in that conversation between the two of them while they were playing golf. I'm not insinuating that. I want you to hear that. I didn't hear someone being manipulated I didn't hear any of those things. But I do point it out to say this, is that our world will stop at nothing to come into your life and say, hey, look, I know you have some ideas, but don't forget about this. And if this is not interesting to you, let me sweeten the deal a little bit to bring your attention to it. And that's the way our world works. It doesn't matter if you're a follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus. That's the way our world works. Because the truth is, when we think about it, a lot of times when someone lobbies for something, it's a single thing, right? And they come in, and this other person is thinking about a million things. They're like, hey, this is the only thing important. My job is to get this one thing done. So how do I sweeten the deal to make sure this is a part of it? And in our world, every single day, we have opportunities like that, just like in the political world. Now, we started this series not with the political agenda. I'm not trying to convince you to vote one way or the other. That is not even about what this is about. This has nothing to do with DC. I'm just using DC to talk about you and me. That's what I'm doing. And for 5 weeks, starting last week, we are leveraging what is all over your news feeds, in your text messages, your emails, your bulletin boards, your mail boxes on the floor everywhere you go, your t-shirts, your hats, all the things. We are simply leveraging what is happening in our country, and we are having a very personal and intimate conversation that politics can be the launching pad for, but at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with Washington. It has everything to do with whatever your address is. Politics has had a negative connotation with it since the very beginning. We looked at 1955, we looked at the 1600s, we went back even further than that. From the very beginning, we've had this negative piece or negative thing associated with politics. The Merriam-Webster's Unabridged Dictionary says this: a politic person is especially a shrewd and crafty schemer. There's this negative connotation associated with politician, and politics. Not just today, but throughout history. And so to talk about this in a you and me kind of way, we said we are going to study the most political story found in the entire Bible. Let me catch you up this week if you weren't here last week. We started the story of a boy named Joseph. Joseph was one of 12 sons, and his brothers were all born from a guy by the name of Jacob. He also had another name, Israel. And Jacob/Israel had these dozen sons. He had one favorite. His name was Joseph. He favored Joseph. He gave him a special jacket. It was fully like all kind of colors and all kind of thing. And he was special. His brothers knew it. All of his siblings understood that he was like the favorite. It was overt. And eventually it got to the brothers. They were aggravated by it. Like, this little whippersnapper right here is taking some of our glory. He might take some of our inheritance. Like, he is infringing on our style. He's infringing on what our life is supposed to be. He begins to have dreams. And in the dreams, all the brothers and the mother and father are like bowing down to him. And he's sharing these dreams out loud. And it just makes them more aggravated and more angry. They're just furious at him. Just furious at him. And so eventually his older brothers decide, we're going to kill him. Not like maybe your kids are thinking, like, I'm going to kill him when I see him. He, whatever, mess my room up or whatever he did. No, they literally were like, we are going to end his life. They were out tending some sheep, and Joseph went to find them to kind of get a report on them. And when he got there, they saw him coming. They're like, hey, let's just end it right now. We'll take his jacket, rip it up into some small pieces. We'll dip it in goat's blood, and we'll just tell our dad that an animal got him, right? So his older brother Reuben steps in and is like, no, we can't do that. No, we're not going to kill him. Who are we? What are we doing? And so let's just put him in this dry well, this cistern, and then we'll figure out what to do with him. And in his mind, he was going to come rescue Joseph, take him to his dad. That didn't happen. This tribe, this traveling tribe of individuals that were coming from one country going to Egypt to do trade, they came along and the brother said, you know what, let's not kill him. You're right, Reuben. Let's sell him as a slave to this crew that's coming through. And so that's what they do. They take him out of the cistern, they sell him as a slave, and he heads to Egypt. And that's where we left off last week. And from that, we said, hey, let's establish what the politics are that's taking place in here. And the political move that the brothers took was, hey, we get rid of the people we feel threatened by. That's the political move. We get rid of the people we feel threatened by. And we counterbalanced that and said, hey, for every political move, there's always a spiritual move. And so what is the spiritual move? What is the Jesus reaction when we encounter people, or we have people that are a part of our church or our community group or whatever you want to call it, your Boy Scout troop or Girl Scout, whatever those things are in your world, whenever there are people that threaten you in those moments, what should our attitude be? And we, as a church, have made a declaration. We've actually made a mission out of creating a You Belong Here movement. In other words, it doesn't matter what you think or where you come from or what your baggage is. We want to create a space where you can establish an opportunity to discover the significance of Jesus, which means that if you're a Republican, you can belong here. If you're a Democrat, you belong here. If you're an independent, you belong here. If you don't vote, you belong here. If you're a politician, you belong here. If you're an atheist, you belong here. If you're a fully devoted follower of Jesus, you belong here. That all of us are in the same place where we are not like Jesus enough today as we could be tomorrow. And is it possible that we would discover something today that could help us in that journey tomorrow? And that's where we pick up, right where we left off. Genesis 39, verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. So the Ishmaelites was that crew that was coming through. The brothers sold Joseph to this particular crew, and they took him straight to Egypt. They took him to the slave auction. They put him up there, and just like you've probably seen in movies, I don't know if he's shackled or not, but for sure he's standing on a slave block auction, and people start bidding, and this guy, captain of the guard, he buys, he's like, hey, I want him. And so he pays money for him, he takes him in as a slave, and he says, hey, here's the deal, let's get to work. Now at this point, in this moment, I'm wondering, how would I have responded if I was Joseph? How would I have responded? Like all of a sudden, I'm in a family that reveres God, who's been faithful to God, who's doing our best every day, do those things, that God has given me dreams. All I did was share those dreams with my brothers and my father and my mother. And what did it get me? It got me sold into slavery. And so at this point, I'm thinking I would say, God, why me? And where did you go? Like I thought you were with us. I thought we had a plan. Our family's faithful. Why is it that I'm suffering? Why in the world am I in Egypt as a slave? How do I go from the favorite son of a patriarch in our family to sold into slavery? How did this happen? And that's how I would have responded. But that's not how Joseph responded. No, Joseph woke up every day as a slave and he worked his butt off. It actually says that God was with him in his slavery, which is wild to me. Because I would think if God was with him, that he wouldn't have put him in slavery. We go to verse 3. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. All right. Okay. We are now, life is looking up. So things didn't go well. I didn't pout about it. I didn't have a pity party. I didn't say, why, woe is me. I just said, all right, I'm going to wake up every day. I'm going to make the best of the situation I've got, even if this is not a very good situation to be making the best of. But every single day, I'm going to devote myself to this idea. I'm going to bring the very best I have to the guy that now owns me, right? Countries and thousands of miles away. That's what I'm going to do. Every day, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to say, God, what do you want me to do? I'm going to serve and I'm going to serve and I'm going to serve. And that's what he's decided to do. And from that, he's rewarded. He's like, look, you're not just you're going to be in charge of all this now. Not just in charge of the people. It says everything he owns, he had authority over. He was in charge of the whole thing. He's boss man, right? Boss, let's go. God is with him. He has established a purpose. He's refound his value and his worth. What would his brothers think now? But remember, his brothers were like, man, remember, the reason that Joseph, if you were here last week, the reason Joseph goes to check on his brothers are in the field doing work. Joseph is not. Joseph is at home, like drinking Gatorade or whatever he's doing at 17. And his father says, go check on your brothers who are working. Now, it didn't bother his father that the baby boy wasn't working. He liked having the baby boy around because he got to see that shiny little coat. But it's when he gets there, his brothers are like, oh, here comes the kid that does nothing. Now, his brothers, I would think, would be pretty proud right now. Like, look at that dude just working himself as a slave. We're so proud of him. That's what they're probably thinking. And Joseph's getting after it. He's got this whole new work ethic. Work ethic. Yeah. Here comes trouble. Verse 6. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. That's not trouble. That's just reality for some of us. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, oh, earmuffs. Come to bed with me. Sorry, that wasn't much of a warning. Well, since I didn't give you a warning, that probably means nap, guys. That probably means she was tired. She needed to take a nap. A really nice nap. You know, that's what he was thinking. So all of a sudden, he's like, things are going great. Like things are moving in the right direction. And then Potiphar's wife is like, well, look at this. Look at this fancy pool boy right here, you know? Like, look at this. How about this? Where did you come from? Now, it's in this moment, we got to ask a question. Who will Joseph be? In this moment, we got to ask a question before we get to the answer, because it's going to give us the answer. Who will Joseph be? His boss's wife walks right up to him and says, hey, let's take a nap. You know? And in that moment, the question is, who will Joseph be? The answer is, Joseph will be who Joseph already is. Yeah, that's right. Joseph will be who Joseph already is. You see, a lot of times we want to convince ourselves that when we get in really difficult decision moments, that we might lapse out of who we typically are. That's not true. No. In those moments, we just do who we actually are. You see, we prepare for the most difficult moments in the mundane moments every single day. Like, we prepare for those really just taxing, very difficult, huge ethical dilemma moments with very small decisions that build on one another. And so when we get to those big decisions, it's just a reaction of who we are, which means that if you've gotten into a place, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with nap time, but it can be with other things. If you've gotten into a place in a very difficult decision and you failed to make a decision that you are look back on and are proud of, that should be an indication to you, not necessarily that in that moment you need to figure out how do I make a better decision. The red flag or the thing that should say to you is, I need to actually change something in the mundane moments of my life that helps me prepare better for the things that honestly you can't get prepared for. Like, who knew that his boss's wife was going to walk up to him and was like, hey, good looking, let's do this thing. Like, that was not on his bingo card for slavery. But what was on his bingo card for slavery was every single day, I'm going to make a decision. God, what do you want me to do? So that when all of a sudden there was this enormous decision that was given to him, he was like, no. In fact, he looks at her and says, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I mean, your husband's trusted me with everything that he has. I can't do that to him. And even more than that, I can't do that to God. Now, what's wild is that he's saying this to an Egyptian wife And for sure, in Egypt, they had a god for everything. A god for the Nile, for the sun, for the moon, for the sand, the stars, frogs, crickets, the whole thing. Like cows, they had gods for everything. And so I'm sure she was thinking, I was like, well, it's just one God. Make them mad. There's lots of other gods I think will be fun. Fertility will be ecstatic, let's do that. But he's looking at her and he's like, no, just big G God. Yeah, I can't do that to him. Can't do that to him. Now, she doesn't take no for an answer. In her mind, she's like, oh, he's playing hard to get. This is fun. So he keeps asking, or she keeps asking, like every day. Like all the time. She's constantly propositioning him over and over again. And he keeps telling her, like, no, the answer's still no. It's still no. And things change. Verse 11. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. That's not good. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand, ran out of the house. So she sees an opportunity. And maybe when she's been asking every other day, she was like, well, maybe they're in another room, or they're down the hall, or it's fine, it'll be quick, whatever. I don't know what she's thinking. But all of a sudden, she sees an opportunity. She's like, ain't nobody in here. It's just me and you. It's just me and you, Joseph. And so she's a little more aggressive this time. She's more aggressive. She just comes right up to him and she just grabs him. She's like, yeah, let me have some of that. She grabs him. And then Joseph is in a spot where he's thinking like, okay, she has a hold of my clothes. What am I going to do? Now, it is frowned upon in establishments where there are slave owners for the slave to smack the hand of the wife of the slave owner. Like, you don't do that. That's a no-no. Like, so what was he going to do? Is he going to get pulled and all of a sudden he's going to smack her hand and say, don't you touch me? Like, that's not going to end well. And so he's processing, like, what am I going to do? And so he just slips out of it. And he runs outside. Well, then she's left holding his clothes. And so how is she going to explain this? And so she runs and finds another servant. And she says, let me tell you what Joseph tried to do to me. And here's the evidence. I fought him off. Here's the evidence. Verse 19. When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, quote, this is how your slave treated me, he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. In this moment, I'm asking the question, God, is this what you wanted? Like, you give him dreams, he shares the dreams. It causes his brothers to have so much jealousy. They're so intimidated by him. They're like, let's get rid of him. They settle for slavery over murder. And so all he does is share what God gives him. That gets him enslaved. And then he makes the decision every day to wake up and do exactly what God has called him to do. And that earns him favor, only to get too much favor with the boss's wife. And then he has a decision to make that is consistent with who he is every other day, which is exactly what God wants him to do. And he does it over and over and over again. And then someone actually grabs a hold of him and he processes and says, look, I can't touch her. I can't fend her off. I'm just going to take this off and I'm going to run outside. I'm going to run as far as I can from this. And then that decision to keep his integrity costs him the position he has now gained and earned and puts him in jail. Does that make any sense to anybody? Do exactly what God's called you to do. Lose everything that you've worked for and end up in prison. Is that the result of God's favor? So let's talk politics. No, not DC politics. Your politics. Here's the political move. Compromise your integrity to protect your own interests. You compromise your integrity to protect your own interests. Let me define integrity for us. It's the quality of being honest, trustworthy, and having strong moral principles that guide a person's actions. It involves consistently doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or when no one is watching. Let me give you a few everyday examples of how integrity plays a role in our lives. Even though you're tired after a long day, you still make it to your friend's event because you said you would. It's integrity. You realize that the cashier gave you $20 extra in change, and so you return it to them. It's integrity. You come across your coworker's open email, but you choose to close it instead of reading it. It's integrity. When you hear someone making an unfair or discriminatory remark, you calmly challenge the comment, even if it makes the situation awkward. That's integrity. A coworker tries to involve you in negative talk about another colleague, but you politely decline, change the subject. It's integrity. You find a wallet at the grocery store in the parking lot. You return it to customer service rather than keeping the money inside. It's integrity. You ensure that you pay back money you've borrowed from a friend, even if they haven't reminded you. It's integrity. You refuse to engage in underhanded tactics or cut corners, even if it means losing a profitable deal. That's integrity. You turn down an offer of money or gifts in exchange for bending the rules or looking the other way. That's integrity. If you tell your children or your partner you'll spend time with them or help them with something, you honor that commitment. That's integrity. So the political move is compromise your integrity to protect your own interests. The spiritual move is you make integrity a priority always. In other words, we don't want to talk about situational integrity. Like, we don't want to use the phrase, well, I have integrity most of the time, right? No, when we talk about integrity, we want to say it's who I am integrity, not what I do most of the time. The definition of integrity actually requires you to be whole, complete, fully honest. It's an all the time. You can't have integrity 90% of the time and say, well, I'm a man of integrity. Like, it doesn't work that way. No, you're a man that 9 out of 10 times is dependable, but there's that one wild card where who knows what you're going to do. That's not the definition of integrity. Wholeness is the definition of integrity. Now, you might say, okay, well, fine. Well, then no one has integrity because none of us are perfect. No, that's not what integrity is either. Integrity isn't getting it right every time. Integrity is, yeah, we get it right, but when we get it wrong, we're honest about it. Instead of us hiding the fact that we didn't pull our weight and blaming it on someone else in the group project, we own up to it first before anyone even discovers that it wasn't done. We're like, hey, honestly, what you're about to see, it's not right, and it's because everybody did their job at me. And I'm not going to let these guys be penalized for it or for you to think less of them. They counted on me and I didn't do it. That's integrity. Yeah, you didn't come through on what you said, but you were the first to admit, I got this wrong. And let me give you a few phrases that people of integrity will have and will frequently come across and say. Phrases like, I messed up. I was wrong. I failed you. If these are not phrases you've ever said, I think there might be a good case that you don't have a lot of integrity. Because the truth is, none of us are perfect. But if you've never admitted that you've made a mistake, if you've never admitted you got it wrong, that you were the failure, if you've never been willing to say out loud, yeah, this whole thing, I could have done something differently. If you've got so much pride that you hide your flaws, if you have so much pride that you protect your misgivings and your mistakes and you allow other people to take the blame or the fault or allow them not to receive what they were supposed to because you didn't do your part, yeah, that's an integrity issue. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for consistency. Integrity, the quality of being honest, trustworthy, and having strong moral principles that guide a person's actions. It involves consistently doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or when no one is watching. I think one of the best ways I've ever seen this that helps me remember what integrity is by drawing it. I will admit, when I did this earlier, those of you who are on the sides, you should get here earlier next time and sit in the middle because you're not going to be able to see this. Oh, I had 2 good circles. Third circle, not quite. So, this first circle is who you think you are. If you were to answer the question, hey, write out on a piece of paper, who do you think you are? Just describe yourself in full. Give all the details, right? This is what describes me. This is what makes me tick. These are adjectives that would say this is who I am, right? This next circle is who other people think you are. If I were to ask them the same question, hey, tell me about so-and-so. Give me all the details that make up who they are. Are they honest, trustworthy, liars, cheats, whatever? Like whatever those things are, right? That's what this circle is. The third circle is who God knows you are. So if God were to fill out the same questionnaire about, that's what would go here. Who you think you are, who other people think you are, and who God knows you are. Where all 3 of those things line up, that's the amount of integrity you have. So, the hope is that who you think you are and who others think you are and who God knows you are would perfectly overlap. And that's real integrity. Like that's what we're working towards. Now, it doesn't matter if your integrity's teeny tiny right now. This is what we're chasing down. It requires us to do some inward looking, right? It requires us to look deep inside of ourselves and ask the question, who am I? But honestly, the best question isn't even to start with our own opinion, is it? The best question is to say, who does God know I am? Because when we ask the question on his behalf, it's very similar to us asking us who we are, but we know that God's going to tell the truth. And so we start with that. hey, how do I match up against who Jesus has called me to be? How do I line up with that? And then where am I falling short? You could even break it into categories. A lot of times we'll talk about rooms of a house, that your life is a room. And that when you invite Jesus to be a part and to lead your life, what you're really asking him to do is to be your interior decorator for every single room in your house. And each room is labeled, like we have a bedroom and a kitchen and bathrooms, those things. But each room for us is labeled. It's labeled with things like our relationships, our romantic relationships, our finances, our job, our family life, our hobbies, what we watch on TV late at night when no one's there. Each one of those has a room. And so the idea is that we would say, God, Jesus, you can have access to every room in my house. You can remodel it. You can do whatever you need to align it to your vision. I don't want to decorate my own space anymore. I want you to decorate it. And it's that process that allows us to start making progress here. There's nothing wrong with admitting that your house is a mess, that your integrity little piece is tiny. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem becomes when we have so much pride that we're not willing to admit that. And so we bring Jesus into our life and we say, hey, you can do this one room and this one room only. And it's called church on Sunday mornings. At church on Sunday mornings, I want to look like I follow you, but the rest of the rooms, I got my own ideas on how to decorate them. But we don't want that pride. We don't want that humility we don't want that lack of humility in our lives. We want to say, look, I get life is going to toss us some sweeteners, and it's going to try to get us off track. And the truth is, when those moments happen, we will simply be who we already are, which is why every single one of us ought to go into the mundane. That list of integrity opportunities I read to you all ago, the cashier stuff and all those things, those are really small moments. And how we respond in those small moments prepare us for those really big, life-altering, oftentimes, decisions. And so we prepare ourselves, we build up that integrity so that when that moment comes, when she looks at us and says, hey, let's take a nap, that we are fully prepared to say, how could I? How could I? I stood before God and my wife and her family and my family, and I look over every single morning, I stand in front of my kids, and how could I? And my God, like, how could I do that to my God? But if every other day that's not our focus, if our focus is just getting by with a lot of pretend, and don't be surprised when you get in that place if the sweetener's pretty sweet. And you make a decision you probably won't be proud of a year from now. Now, the good news is our church is full of people who love their sweeteners. But I've realized there's a lot of grace that comes with a relationship with Jesus to begin aligning things and making it right. And so I want you to know, if your circles right now aren't even touching, I think this is the very best place for you to start. And if you want to have a conversation because you don't even know where to begin, how to start making those circles merge, I'd love to have a conversation with you. There are so many other people here that would love to have a conversation with you. No judgment, just simply compassion and care for helping you figure out, how do you lead or be a part of a healthy family? How do you step back into the lives of people that you care about that maybe you've stepped out of? How do you make an adjustment to your circles and your overall life? Those are real conversations that we love to have. Because even if you have no integrity in this very moment, you still belong here. And I wouldn't want you anywhere else. In fact, there are so many people that will close their eyes tonight, thanking God that you decided to give him a shot this morning at Foundation. Because we are on a You Belong Here movement. Because Jesus honestly is